Louis L. Sousa of the Honolulu Police, because as we mentioned in the earlier podcast, Mark lived and worked in Hawaii for quite a time, which is very heavy in military bases. I don't recall if we mentioned that, but it's a place that's very heavy in military bases. It's got one of the highest concentration of military bases in the US. Anyway, Sousa of the Honolulu Police spent over a month inquiring into Lennon's murder and into Mark's background, and he told Fenton Bresler, I did not come to the opinion that he was a Lennon nut. It appeared like he was just the opposite. He was not particularly in favour of that type of music. He was not a particular fan of John Lennon. He did not express any views on Lennon. He didn't talk about him. And there's also a quote from the book, where is it? Yeah, John Lennon, Life, Times and Assassination by author Phil Strongman. And he writes, and I quote, that Chapman, the supposed Lennon obsessive and fan of fans, quote unquote, did not own one Lennon single, book or album, not one. That is, until he bought that copy of Double Fantasy that he got Paul Goresh to sign. And it appears to me that, again, we've got this weird kind of discourse with what's being said in the mainstream and what we're, what the actual truth might be. And then there's this wife, Gloria, who tells us that actually the artist that he really loved, that he really, really got into, was Todd Rundgren. She says the musical artist, she was quoted by author Jack Jones for a book, I think, that came out a few years back. And she says the musical artist that had the greatest influence on Mark wasn't John Lennon, it was Todd Rundgren. Mark often told me that he believed Rundgren was a true musical genius. He has had at least 2 complete Rundgren collections at separate times, but he got very depressed listening to the music. He said it depressed him to hear music that good. And one of Mark's childhood friends by the name of Mark McManus has been quoted as saying, Mark totally worshipped Todd Rundgren. He knew every word to every song. And Chapman himself has said, right between the chambers of your heart is how Rundgren's music is to me. I cannot overestimate the depth of what his music meant to me. So Todd Rundgren, by the looks of it, is the guy that he really went for.
Right.
I don't know if I've got some more to say about that. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but I've got some more kind of Rundgren themes that actually might fit into some other kind of stuff. Weird stuff.
Not too much. I believe Todd Rundgren had a large estate in Hawaii, if I'm not mistaken.
Ah.
So yeah, in Hawaii, I believe he lived there. So.
Oh wow. Yeah. Wow. Do you know what I mean? It's like, what? Okay, well, hold that thought, okay, because if you recall when we spoke last with Mark in the previous podcast of this Lennon special, we talked about Catcher in the Rye and Holden Caulfield, the character in this novel, The Catcher in the Rye, who is fixated on phoniness and phonies. And we also talked about Mark David Chapman, who fixated onto the book The Catcher in the Rye in 1980. I think he borrowed it from a library initially, and that's what we're thinking. It was the trigger book, his trigger book, basically, his mind control book. And we also picked up on the fact that, or we also mentioned the fact that at the same time that he bought that book and was reading that book, he also bought a couple of books about John Lennon, and they were kind of books about John Lennon as his life was in the late 70s. So we're talking here about a very rich, wealthy rock star who has, countless properties. He has amassed great wealth. Here he is living in splendour and wealth, as these books are said to have outlined Lennon to Mark David Chapman as he was reading them. And then Mark David Chapman supposedly picked up on the phoniness of John Lennon from that. Because he thought to himself, well, hey, wait a minute, I thought John Lennon was meant to be this peace lover who fought against the man, against the establishment, and here he is living like a king That's a bit phony.
Imagine no possessions.
Imagine no possessions. Yeah, exactly. And then fixating on the phoniness with the Holden Caulfield idea of phoniness, of course. And, of course, you've got the trigger book and everything. So, right, so as I say, hold the thought of the Hawaii thing and because, okay, there have been claims, and I don't know if you've heard of this. I haven't been able to confirm this. There's a couple of reports, I think, maybe one or two reports, that Chapman actually was convinced that Rundgren had sent him, quote-unquote, signals, okay? Mm. And the other claim, and I don't know if you've been able to, if you've heard of this or been able to check this out, and I read about this years ago, and for the life of me, I can't find anything else out about it. Apparently, and this is according to a couple of reputable news sources, Chapman was wearing a Todd Rundgren T-shirt on the day of the shooting. Oh,
I have never heard that, no.
Right.
How interesting is that? Huh.
And did you know about the hotel room, about the bureau in his hotel room?
I'm not sure. Remind me.
There's a bureau in his hotel room, and it had, on the bureau, it had a copy of his album. A copy of Rundgren's album ceremoniously displayed on his hotel room bureau. And this is the hotel room, by the way, in New York. On the night of the shooting, he was staying at a hotel. Right. He was staying at a YMCA before that, and then he moved into a hotel after that. And he left a load of tokens and little things on his bureau. And that's what the police found. They found this copy of one of Todd Rundgren's albums. And there's another thing, and this is to do with the phoniness thing again. I did a little bit of background on Todd Rundgren, and I found this letter that he sent to the British music magazine Melody Maker in 1974, in which he attacks Lennon, and it just sounds like it could have come out of a Holden Caulfield book. This is what the letter says. It says, "John Lennon ain't no revolutionary. He's an effing idiot, man, shouting about revolution and acting like an arse. It just makes people feel uncomfortable. All he really wants to do is get attention for himself. And if revolution gets him that attention, he'll get attention through revolution. He's an important figure, sure, but so was Richard Nixon. Nixon was just like another generation's John Lennon, someone who represented all sorts of ideals, but was out for himself underneath it all along." And there's also a song that came out on the album A Wizard, A True Star, Rundgren's album, and I think that's the actual album that was on the bureau. And there's a song on there called Rock and Roll Pussy, and apparently that's about John Lennon, and it's a dig at John Lennon and his bed-ins. I've got the lyrics here. They're not very long. The lyrics are: beat it, beat your guitar, smash it till it sees stars, rip it to shreds, throw down your axe and then jump into bed. Get up and see revolution on the TV. Will you get your nails dirty, or are you only just a rock and roll pussy? So, yeah, I don't know what you make of that, but there's all this kind of weird kind of correlations.
Yeah. That makes the most sense out of anything that I've heard. That Mark David Chapman was really obsessed with Rundgren and not John Lennon at all. That's very interesting.
So would I be reaching if I was to say that maybe Rundgren was the actual trigger?
I don't think, not with that information, not at all. It was almost like Hinckley Jr. there and his obsession with Jodie Foster. Right, it kind of has a resonation there. They're kind of similar stories, and if you look at it from that point of view,
yeah. And other things that were found on that hotel bureau, and this takes us even more into the realms of mind control, I suppose. If you're looking at it that way, is obviously there was references to Holden Caulfield. There was a pocket Bible on the bureau, apparently, and where it was inscribed Holden Caulfield, and where it said the gospel on the page where it was the gospel according to John, it had been amended to read the gospel. Well, I suppose you can guess the gospel according to John Lennon, and there was also a picture of of Judy Garland and the Cowardly Lion, like a movie still. And this takes us into the realms, am I reaching here, of Wizard of Oz?
No, not at all.
So,
right. Which has also been said to been used as a mind control agent as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was Kathy O'Brien in her book Transformation of America through Mind Control. Kathy O'Brien, of course, is a whistleblower, if you like. She's a self-confessed mind control MK Ultra victim who got out of it, so she says, and she wrote this book, Transformation of America. And in that book, she claims that one of the devices that was used in which to control, she was in it from childhood, and from her childhood, she was like a childhood slave through into adulthood until she broke out. And she says that in her childhood, that what people such as herself, MK Ultra slaves, programming that was used was fiction, to take them into a fictional world. And one of the fictional tales was Disney, and of course Wizard of Oz as well. So yeah, so and there's also that one of the very few TV appearances that he made. I think it was in 1988. I've got a quote here during a TV interview. He said, and he's talking about the moment that he supposedly shot Lennon. He said, "I looked at Lennon and he walked past me, and then I heard in my head a voice saying, 'Do it, do it, do it,' over and over again. 'Do it, do it, do it, do it,' like that." So he pulled the gun out of his pocket and pulled the trigger. And he also told Barbara Walters in 1992 the similar thing. He said, "I heard this voice saying over and over, 'Do it, do it, do it, do it.' So I pulled the .38 revolver out of my pocket." That's what he said during that interview. And even the aforementioned Arthur O'Connor, he told Fenton Bresler, he said to Fenton Bresler, and I quote, this is from the book, "It's possible Mark could have been used by somebody." He says, and I quote, "I saw him the night of the murder. I studied him intensely. He looked as if he could have been programmed. That was the way he looked, and that was the way he talked. It could have been drugs, and no, we did not test for drugs. It was not standard procedure. But looking back, he could have been either drugged or programmed, or a combination of both." So that's what he's saying. This is a police officer. So we've got him. So we've got Chapman standing. We were told that he shot Lennon, and then he pulled out a copy of Catcher in the Rye and began to read it. That's his trigger book. And I've got another quote here, again from Arthur O'Connor. It's amazing, actually, how one cop has been so candid and honest about this kind of conspiracy thing. Again, from Fenton Bresler's book. He says to Bresler, and I quote, "As far as you are trying to build up some kind of conspiracy, I would support you in that line. If Mark wanted to get away with it, he could have got away with it." This is what I think we mentioned this in the previous podcast, that he could have run away. There was the subway right on the corner and no one around to stop him. But he remained on the scene voluntarily. He had a 75% chance, says Arthur O'Connor, in his book, in his estimations, of never being apprehended, but he wanted to get caught. I don't remember if we mentioned that in the first podcast, but yeah, he just stood there, and he could have run either direction, left, right, forwards, back.
He could have disappeared into Central Park, which is right across the street. He could have taken the subway. There were, I'm sure, the taxi cabs that were parked right there probably wouldn't have picked him up. But I mean, there were several ways he could have just snuck off into the night. This is like 11 o'clock at night, and New York City, bustling city, and he could have easily just slipped away.
I'm not coming from the States myself. I'm not too familiar with New York. I'd love to go one day, but what is New York like at around that time of night? Is it busy? I mean, would that area near Central Park, would that have been busy and bustling on a December night at that kind of time?
So So, if you read and read, you'll find that supposedly on that night, December 8th, it's going into winter. It's